Our third speaker is Anton Parsons, who, another Christchurch person, graduated from the university here, the School of Fine Arts, with a degree in sculpture in 1990, and since then he's regularly exhibited in a variety of spaces, but has also done a large number of public art commissions. His most recent one is large-scale work outside CPIT called Passing Time, which was installed on the 18th of February, and he only got to see it again this week. So I think a rather interesting experience. So Anton is going to talk a little bit about his work and about that work in particular. Anton.
Hi. Okay. So I'm going to just talk about, give a brief overview of Passing Time and a few of the works that led up to the making of it. The start point for Passing Time was a series of singular number blocks I made for a show at Jonathan Smart's a couple of years ago, and this is one of them. At the time I was thinking about which art form was the most popular. From a sculptor's point of view, it's clear that painting is always the winner. So, and there's always a conflict between painters and sculptors, I can tell you from personal experience. So using history as my example, with its obvious narrative, I had to go at making my own version of a painting. So I wanted to make my own history painting, and I wanted to use sculpture as the medium. This is the basic idea behind this work, and these works in particular. So I reduced the idea of history painting down to its essentials, a date and a colour. So that's all I needed. The first show of these date blocks that I had relevance to New Zealand history, so I went for the obvious choices. So I went for the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, Abel Tasman turning up, and I even did some first four ships because it was in Christchurch. So I wanted to try and contextualise the numbers. So by placing the date on a three-dimensional block, it confused the beginning and end of the sequence of the numbers and introduced an element of chance, which I kind of wanted. I didn't want to just lay it out bare. It had to be a three-dimensional rendering. So the sequence of the four numbers was also disturbed by the nature of the block. You could not see the four numbers at once, and this meant that the viewer had a large part to play in getting meaning from the work. And in fact, the audience and what the audience actually did was apply their own history very quickly, and I started fielding requests for people's birthdays, which I quite liked because essentially the block still remained the same. There was still the same sort of information on there. There was still a 0 to 9 numbering system, but it meant that the person who requested this was actually directly involved with the artwork, so they were contextualising it for themselves. So the next thing I did was assemble groups of these to note periods of time and sometimes people's lives. So this is a work I installed in New York, and it's the 1950s, which is sort of my favourite, well, the start point of my favourite period of art, really. And New York in the 50s would have been an exciting place to be, so that's sort of what I was sort of referencing. This work is a work that I installed in Auckland, in a warehouse in South Auckland, and it, in fact, notes quite a few years in the future. This is the last show that was actually in Jonathan Smart Gallery when it was in High Street, and it is a portrait, in fact, of an old art tutor of mine, and but it's quite it's quite pared back. So it's a Passing Time, and so that's sort of the precursor to where I got ideas for this work. The work is a series of number blocks strung together, and so it's a large-scale version of the individual blocks, but with a change of material to cope with its new context, being outside and in a public space. Each block is turned quarter of a turn clockwise to join to the next and forms an endless loop. The form of the work is open to allow visual and physical access to the CPIT campus where it's situated. The work was commissioned by CPIT and the Christchurch City Council. So the birth date, funnily enough, of CPIT, which is 1906, is where this work begins, and the endpoint is the beginning of 2010 when it was intended to be installed initially, but it got postponed. So there are different levels of access to the work, and these are dependent on how close people get to it. From far away, passing time looks like a ribbon of random information, but the closer you get to it physically and metaphorically, the more meaning can be attained. Again, chance plays quite a large part in passing time, as it does with the smaller works. While there is a reason for the numbers to be there, a narrative, there is also the possibility for information contained within the numbers to be read in quite different ways. This chance element in the work is of equal importance to any intended narrative that I have. And given the context in which the work is in, the ability of the viewer to read the work on a number of levels is important. From a large amount of information, it is hard to get meaning, but to isolate one box and look at 4 numbers away from the crowd, there is a potential to make sense. There are 104 years noted in passing time. Over a length of time such as a century, so much happens to so many people on local, national and international scales, both personal and political, individually and collectively. It is impossible to differentiate which years are more or less important than the others in terms of experience of the individual. From this formal arrangement, people are able to come to the work and make their own associations of significance and see in the work what they want and see and recall their own experiences as they pick out the years that are relevant to them. I hope passing time will provide people with a way of thinking about their own past and the past and present of their city. Thanks.
Thank you, Anton. It struck me when I was looking at this work yesterday and looking through the centre of it as an arch, which looks down High Street, just how people standing there in the future and looking through will see something so completely different from what was there when this work was first installed, and people's memories will be quite different, and I'm sure some of those dates on there will be quite resonant in different sorts of ways from what I'm sure you envisaged, Anton, or what anyone else expected.